Yes, yes, yes. Happy Friday, everybody. Party people in the house. Welcome. You're listening to the Entrepreneurial Web. I'm your host, Jeremiah Fox. We're coming at you live from Brooklyn, New York. I'm hanging in my restaurant, Della, right now. We're in the Zoom sphere still. Haven't made it back into the studio, but one day we'll get back to the studio. The beauty of this and this scenario is that I get to bring on guests from all over. So far, we've done North America. I haven't gone international yet, but we're this close. Today, my guest is a connection I made recently on Twitter. We've kind of been off and on each other's radars, like passing ships in the night. But my guest last week, Tea with Mike, thank you, connected us, and here we are today. So that's kind of the beauty, the light at the end of the tunnel is that connections have been made. You adjust, you modify, and you find a lot of other really great things in that process. So before I bring my guest on, the message of the week, this is something he tweeted earlier today. Sorry, you're gonna have to back me up, man. I didn't get time to transcribe the second one. So the first one, he said this morning, it kind of instigated some thought process, and it's every $1 million company started with $1 million idea. With that, we're gonna mash it up with Isaac Mashman of Mashman Ventures. Welcome to the show, Isaac. How are you today?
Man, I'm doing great. It's an honor to be on. How are you doing, Jeremiah?
Thank you. So since I blew the real quote, why don't you? Do you remember what it was? I don't have Twitter open right now. Do you remember?
Yeah.
And you were like, let's do this instead.
Well, I mean,
I was like, yeah, sure. And then like I'm like running around doing crazy stuff in the restaurant, and I was like, I didn't get to it.
Man, I completely understand. Now, the first quote was good, but I feel like it can almost be overused sometimes. But the quote that I said was, people get too big to do the small things, and they wonder why they don't get the big results.
Yeah,
and that's really a testament,
But I think the first one, even though you might feel like it's kind of unoriginal, I want people to get a little backstory on you too, because you're a pretty young dude, and you're coming in just looking through your social media. You got some big ideas. You're going at it hard, and I think it's a great way to preface the show. Either way, So with that, why don't you tell everybody a little about yourself? You're a Florida native, is that correct?
Yeah, born and raised in Jacksonville, Florida. I was raised with the entire mentality of, go to school, get good grades, get a good job. And a lot of times, people told me what to do up to the point of college, but they never told me what to do after college. And I went through single mom for most of my life, eventually got remarried, but I was that A+ student. I'm not one of those entrepreneurs who can say that I was a D or F student. Like I literally went my entire childhood with the aspirations of going to college, although I didn't know what I was going to college for. And then my senior year in high school, I was going through some, crazy times. And looking back, I realized that I've kind of stumbled into entrepreneurship and viewed it as my therapy. Got started in business as a senior. Didn't legally start my business until earlier this year in 2020. But over the past couple of years, I got in and out of the industries of network marketing, wanted to do a record label, started with a clothing line, and a whole bunch of different avenues and niches and fields. And then I launched my company, Mashman Ventures, earlier on 2020.
And the backbone of that has to do with branding, correct?
Yeah. I started Mashman Ventures to combine, to basically help out with my personal brand. That was like the big thing, if I wanted to write a book, I want to be able to self-publish it. If I do speaking engagements, there are tax benefits that come with starting a business that a lot of people don't realize. But the backbone of it from like a company standpoint of like marketing is personal branding.
Which is huge. And that's something I definitely wanted to talk about, because I was like, for me, it was the opposite. I was like high school dropout, selling weed. Like, it's funny because when I first started this show, the executive producer, Sam, interviewed me, and he was asking me, he was like, so when was your first, what was your first hustle? What was the first thing you did? And he was like, for me, it was selling candy. And I thought back and I was like, oh yeah, we sold nickel bags in 8th grade. I guess that was the beginning of it. And for me, like the word entrepreneur wasn't a thing growing up.
Right.
You were just like a business guy or you weren't. And I remember the first time somebody called me that, it was like 10 years ago. And I was in the midst of like opening a bunch of businesses. And they're like, oh, you're just a regular entrepreneur. And I was like, are you insulting
What
me?
is that?
What does that mean? Yeah. And I've interviewed a couple of times a lady, she's a neighbor friend of mine. And she's got an MBA from NYU. And I asked her, like, is it a part of like business curriculum? And she said, they're just now starting to introduce it, and like the idea of entrepreneurship and catering classes around it, which I think are it's kind of like studying jazz in college, you know?
Yeah, yeah. Well,
It's
it's
like,
interesting that it's like one to be able to talk about that, man. That's an aura of transparency. Salute. You've come a long way, I can tell.
I don't
But
know.
it's come on, man, give yourself credit. But no, I think that it's interesting though that entrepreneurship is being introduced to the curriculum, but at the same time, I don't think that there's anything that can benefit a person more than just going out and
Yeah.
experiencing those things. I think we can agree on that.
And to your point about college too, like I dropped out of 2 high schools. I worked my ass off for a couple years, and then eventually ended up going to a 4-year university and ultimately getting a master's degree. But it was all in music and music performance. Yeah, I grew up as a
Interesting.
musician. Yeah, I know, right?
Okay.
The stream meanders, bro, big time. But
Nothing
yeah,
wrong with that.
music was my passion as a kid. My mom's a musician as well, and she had gone back to get her master's degree, and I was like 20
Hmm.
years old, running like a reggae band, playing gigs at night, and doing like construction and lawn care during the day. And she was like, "You should
Jeez.
check this out." And I was like, "Dude, I don't have a degree." And she was like, "I think we can work this out." And she knew somebody in administration, and they
Hmm.
helped me out. So I did 2 performance degrees, and I was a freelancer. I just wanted to play. That was it. I just wanted to play and make
Okay.
music and do nothing more. And then it's funny, you get in there and you realize, oh shit, there's like a huge business component to this. And it kind of
Right.
jaded me at first, but I'd also spent equally as much time in the food and culinary scene. And hence the reason why I have a restaurant today. It's funny because I knew that's a very creative outlet too. And I knew that the business was intertwined because it was like business first. And then you get
Hmm.
to make the stuff because you have a storefront, so you always have to put the business at the forefront. Now it's all come full circle and I appreciate it all. But like I definitely like quit music because I was like, this is a bunch of business bullshit. It's sucking my art
Honestly,
out.
well,
I
that's
was
the thing, man. Music industry is a dirty business
yeah.
by a lot of different avenues. I mean, it's a great business. Don't get me wrong, but
Right.
dude, if it's taken away that creative side of you and kind of becoming more of a chore than an actual passion, then that kind of
Yeah.
defeats the entire purpose of doing it.
Well, and the point was, and I etched this out in the restaurant industry, was you have to just like be yourself. You have to work harder. Like you were talking about being niche, like anytime you are my restaurant, if you saw it, it's just like as niche as it gets. It's just like off the the it's not mainstream. And so we've had to work extra hard to really develop a culture around it and a following,
Hmm.
but we've done it, and it just needs more work. And I just threw in the towel on certain things earlier. Yeah, they're not done. It's not over. But to your point again, a lot of people have come to me now that I'm, established and I've got businesses and I still have a music studio and I still publish and produce
Hmm.
and things. So my friends who've got kids that are like heading into college or high school, they're like, oh, should Billy go to school for music? And I'm like, no. Should Billy go to
No.
school for cooking? I'm like, no, Billy should get his ass out on the street, go into a restaurant, get into the clubs. I mean, you can't get into clubs right now, but it'll come back. But like,
Post
you gotta,
COVID, right?
yeah, but it's all gonna snap back. But it's like you need to grind, and you can make money. Especially like the restaurant industry is so indicative of this. You can make money while getting the best education possible versus paying 120 grand for a 2-year associate's degree, and then you get put in a restaurant, you don't know what to do. I mean, it's interesting that
Exactly.
schools like the Culinary Institute here in New York, they used to have a mandatory 2-year in the field work requirement before you could apply. So you had to be, you had to have worked in a restaurant. It didn't matter. It could have been an ice cream store, but you had to have 2 years
Hmm.
experience before they would let you apply to the school. And they got rid of that. And I worked for this chef years ago who was an alumni from there, and he had an apprenticeship thing, and they would send us
Hmm.
these kids in the summer, and he would be like, if they can't hack it, get rid of them. And I'd fill them all out by afternoon. Like they come in the morning and by afternoon, you're like, where'd they go? And like, they were terrible. They didn't know how to work, but they just paid all this
Yeah.
money for a degree. It's crap, man. So you did not go to college, I'm assuming, or did you do any classes?
No, you didn't. While I was in high school, I was taking, advanced placement courses,
Mm-hmm.
that stereotypical route. I had college credits and, I could have got a full-ride scholarship in Florida. They have a fantastic program that's paid for by the lottery. Can't even remember what it's called. Anyways, that the scholarship fund, like I could have taken the SAT one more time, got additional 10 points, got a full-ride scholarship. I got accepted to Florida State and a couple other colleges, but towards the end, man, and this is when I first got introduced to network marketing. I saw these 20-year-olds, 21-year-olds making $10,000 a month, and coming from, a family that a lot of my issues were caused because of the lack of money, or arguably the lack of the mindset to get that money. I was like, you know what, why am I going to go to college for a marketing degree? Possibly. Like, I didn't really even know what I wanted to do. You know, I was not one of those kids who's like, I have a passion for engineering. I have a passion for this. I have a, you know, like, I know I'm set. And so, you know, I remember telling my guidance counselor, I'm like, I'm not going to college. And he's like, what do you mean you're not going to college? You know? And man, you know, there have been a couple of times where I haven't really regretted that decision, but I've looked back and I'm like, man, I've sacrificed so much. Like, I got to make this work. And so now college just wasn't the route.
Yeah, but that's great, because that's where the real strength comes from. Like when you know, when you enter the dark woods and you're just like, I'm going to get to the other side.
Right.
The people that get to the other side, and right now is so telling of that as well. Like all these people who started in their business when the market was at its peak and you could kind of pull off whatever you wanted. I mean, literally, there were like, you know, in New York City, there were like unicorn stores on every corner. And I'm like, what the fuck is this? Like, where are we going with this?
Right.
And they're all gone now. It's just like, man. So if you started, then yeah, you could literally like polish turds and make money off of it. But now it's like the people that survive this, the people that get out of the woods, they're like the true samurai, the business samurai. I'm really into martial arts, so I tie that into business. And I think the two, they're parallel journeys and universes. So every now and then I'll make a silly samurai or martial arts.
Not silly. I think that there's a beautiful thing about that though, because with martial arts, something I want to get involved with is like Krav Maga eventually. Once, you know, find a good trainer, that kind of thing. But you know, just the overall mindset and the aspect of being a part of that and growing and hitting new levels and hitting new peaks. I think that's not cheesy or cliche at all.
No, it's not. It's not cliche. I just make it silly sometimes. You should start with jujitsu. Jujitsu is like the foundation, and then add some Krav. Yeah, start with jujitsu. Mindset wise, I mean, jujitsu is like the most intellectual, I think, of all of the martial arts. So you get that as a foundation. But you know, it's a specific type of movement, so you want to add some other things to it. So like Krav Maga would be good, Muay Thai. I do a little capoeira as well, but always with jiu-jitsu as like the cornerstone, because it's just human chess. It's like smoke and mirrors, and like it's well played. And then, you know, like I was when the schools were open, I would train 5-6 days a week, and there was always like a message every class. You know, the professor would get up and what he was saying applied exactly to like what I had to do as soon as I left. Like I usually had to go to work, and it was like, oh yeah, that's that thing. And it just like plugged right into to the mindset. And it's phenomenal. I mean, a lot of the stuff that I put out on social media is stuff that I learned from jiu-jitsu, not from business, not from like, you know, working so hard and being so introspective. I had, you know, someone had to feed it to me, but it's great stuff. So when you see those quotes, it's not me. I'm just passing.
Yeah, I see them on occasion. I see a video getting tackled on the floor.
Yeah, we do that. That's just, you know, that's just the visual eye candy. And also, you know, you get to see some silliness. You're just like, oh, wow, that guy just got through across the room, you know?
No, that adds to the character side of things. I like it, man.
Well, it does. And I believe in when you're promoting, and we'll talk about this. We're going to take a break in a minute, but I'd like to delve into that more, the idea of the personal brand and like really being yourself and not being afraid to be multifaceted and put out there like what you really have going on in your life. Cause it's like, I'm a business owner. And for me, it's great because I'm in a you know, in a high traffic area, you know, high concentration. It's a great community. You know, I live on the same block that my businesses are on, and most of the other business owners here do too. So you're awesome. Intertwined. Yeah, it really is. You're intertwined in this like physical community, and people get to see everything about you. Like you parent publicly, like they see me like beating my kid's ass on the street, and they're like, you know everything about you. And it's like, I came to the social media game pretty late, and that was just, I heard that right away, kind of like, just be yourself, you know, put everything up. Don't hesitate. And I was like, all right, let's see if there's something. And I just think back, like if all I was doing was like, hey, I have a radio show. Like people would be like, yeah, nobody cares. Nah. But they're like, wow, I just saw that guy get thrown. That's the guy with the radio show. Look, he just went flying across the room, you know? Right. And all of a sudden it's like, oh, he's human. And I always like to rope that in too. And then like with the guests too, like be as human as possible. I want to hear your story, you know, where you come from, so that somebody that's listening, there could be a kid right now that's like 17 years old, that's like right behind where you're at. And like, can I do this? And they're like, oh man, Isaac just said, he came from that. It's very similar. Man. And boom, away they go.
And that's a deeper reason to why I do it. Obviously, growing up and seeing the lack of money was an influence, and that was kind of something that kind of sparked my journey. But deeper than that, it's like, do I have somebody who's watching me? Like that big brother approach. Like I was a single child, and I didn't have siblings. I mean, I had step siblings and stuff, but there is an age gap. And so if I had like an older brother who I could have like learned from or viewed as my mentor, I think that's a really powerful thing. And I think that behind everybody, man, if you could find a mentor, that's huge. Mm-hmm. And I've talked to younger kids before, and I'll give them the straight up approach. Like their parents might not like the approach because the parent could be like, go to college. And I would say, don't go to college. Right. But at the same time, it's, coming from the heart. I don't have to worry about mixed emotions. I don't have to worry about, being cautious about what I say, because it's like, it's real, it's authentic.
Sure.
And I don't like to use the word authenticity too much, just because I feel like that's what everybody says now. We'll get into that after the break. I don't want to get into like a big segment and then
let's do it. Let's take a quick break.
Like, oh man.
Yeah. No. Save it for the sucker punch. All right, everybody, we'll be right back. Hang tight. Welcome back, everybody. You're listening to the Entrepreneurial Web. Again, I'm your host, Jeremiah Fox. Today we're zooming to. Are we in Florida today, Isaac?
No, I am in Arkansas.
Arkansas. Okay.
Of all places, right?
Of all places.
Of all places.
So we're talking to Isaac Mashman. He's the founder of Mashman Ventures, and he is in Arkansas. What part of Arkansas are you in?
I am in a town called Conway. It's it's a little bit north of Little Rock, the state capital. So,
and what brought you to Arkansas from Florida?
A girl.
There you go.
Yeah. No, it was I'm from Jacksonville, Florida. Flew to California. I was living in and out of California for about 10 months, give or take. Started talking to this girl that I met through Twitter, ironically. And, we were talking for about 4 months, and I ended up flying out to her, and then we decided to get an apartment together, and here I am. So
awesome. Yeah, no,
most unexpected things.
I chased a girl in New York, and here we are. Been 20.
Where are you from originally?
Nashville, Tennessee.
Really?
Yeah, I grew up in the South. I lived in the South until I was 22, I think. But the last few years I was there, I spent probably half the time in New York, bouncing back and forth because of a girl. And
beautiful state.
Yeah, no, it's great. It's fantastic. I'm East Coast through and through. Just love the East Coast. I was born and raised in Nashville, but I lived along the coast for most of my life. Went to school in Buffalo. It's too cold, way too cold.
Yeah, I couldn't do that.
Fun for like a little bit. Yeah. But yeah, exactly. This is a nice, New York City, especially, is a nice happy medium because you're right on the coast. It never gets cold for very long. It does for a little bit. It's like we had a cold snap a few days ago, and now it's like 60 degrees. And I'm like, it's December. Love it. Bring it on. So,
right. Yeah.
Cool. So Florida, California, Arkansas, we were talking about authenticity, buzzword for the day. And what's funny to me is like, so, I grew up in the 80s and 90s, and I mentioned earlier, like in high school, I was like running this reggae band. I was the drummer, but I was also managing the band and like doing all the booking and everything. But like all the, it was like a roots reggae band, and all the dudes were like West Indian, like older guys. Like the lead singer was my dad's age. It was pretty funny. But their whole thing was, just being like true to yourself, and these great like values that I learned then, pre-social media, pre-internet, all that stuff. And again, being a latecomer to the game, I've just got into the social media scene within the last couple of years. And there's like all these buzzwords, and I'm like, you guys need to go listen to some roots reggae, because they just say it in the most honest way. But it was kind of embedded in me. So when, I was talking to a guy, he's like a social media marketer when I first started all this stuff, like the show and beefing up things for my businesses. And I was like, man, I don't know shit about this. Like, and he was like, that's kind of beautiful. He's like, cause you're going to come in. He's like, you're a real dude. You're going to come in fresh, and maybe it'll be a good thing, a good voice. And I was like, oh, okay, I could do that. So what's your, like, you started to talk about it, your sentiments around authenticity, but also just like being yourself.
Yeah. Well,
especially through social media and personal branding.
I think that what the conversations that people have in private are now brought to the public view through social media. It's like social media at its core is just a way for us to interact with other people who are just like us in different places. Like, you have a life, and we have a lot of similarities in our own individual life. We wake up in the morning, probably drink coffee, we do whatever else we do. And it's like, we don't realize that pre-social media, right? I was born and raised in the internet era. So I don't have the luxury of saying that, I saw it come in and saw the changes and the evolution, but just in the past 5 years, I've seen the evolution of technology and social media and it grow. A couple years ago, TikTok didn't exist, and now it is. And it's like, bam. But I don't think people realize that it's just like, we're normal people having normal conversations, but certain words can kind of become overused or overplayed out. But I think that the message still stands the same of like the importance behind it. But at the same time, people don't break down what it really means to be authentic, or what it really means to be this person, be this individual. And when I first got involved with all of this, man, I took to Gary Vee, and I feel like even saying that makes me like just, it kind of makes me cringe.
Little cringy.
I love Gary. I love Gary, but at the same time, he wasn't the first person who I saw, because I always had those entrepreneurial tendencies. But I saw him and I saw his message, and I kind of reverse engineered his brand. And the one thing that he always talks about is be authentic, be yourself.
Yeah.
And what I did is I took to that whole hustle mentality, entrepreneur mentality. And it's taken me a while to finally figure out that like, hey, like I can be myself without having to take to any specific message, but the message that I want to create and the message that I feel the most, driven to talk about. And it's really, man, about being, it is about being yourself. Yeah. Like I'm trying to break down something that's so simple, but I feel like people overthink it and overcomplicate it. It's as simple as taking a picture of, you going and practicing martial arts, or me taking a picture of my office, or me drinking coffee, or the coffee maker going. But what that ties into, and a little bit of value when it comes to personal branding, is by posting these different aspects of your life, you're not trying to be, unless you're trying to be like a lifestyle vlogger or influencer, there's a balance to things. But by taking different aspects of your life and putting them out there for the world to see, you're enabling different levels of connection, because somebody else could be a huge coffee drinker. I'll use the example, right? Tea with Mike. I love that kid.
Yeah.
He's built an entire community based around people who drink tea. It's something that's so simple, yet so like intimate, and like you have that emotional connection with him because he drinks tea, and because you drink tea, you're going to support him. And it's the same thing with posting a video of you doing martial arts. You're going to attract certain people who might have an interest in martial arts, or if I wanted to get started, I know that I could come to you to find out, hey, where do I start? What's the thing to look for in a good instructor? And man, I just think that not overthinking it is a person's best friend.
Yeah, that's the best advice I've gotten. And it's funny because even, I would tell myself that I wasn't overthinking, and, you sit down with somebody that really like is good at this, and they're kind of picking apart at your process, and then they're like, you're overthinking it. And I'm like, no. And I'm like, oh yeah, I am.
You are overthinking it.
Like it happened.
You said you're not overthinking. Yeah.
Right.
You say you're not overthinking it, which means you're overthinking it.
That is often the case, but it's really been the best advice. And it's funny. It's definitely like peeling those parts of the, those layers of the onion away to kind of get at the core. And, it's happened twice, I'd say, in the last like 4 months. Just meeting with people that are like really good at it, and them exposing a little thing and me being like, oh, okay. And then I get to work, and then it's like, wow, there really is some candy at the bottom of this jar. It's been great. I've enjoyed it, but it's definitely like, I gotta call the kids, like gotta call the, somebody in their 20s, because like people my age, and it's very interesting for me. And, business owners just slightly older than me, just a little bit, like a few years. They're even like farther in the dark. I feel like, I caught like the tail end of it. And there's a little bit of hope, I think, because I just act immature most of the time. So I can, like 24-year-olds relate to me. But like,
you're young at heart.
I'm very young at heart. My kids are like, oh my God, Dad, will you grow up, please? But, and something similar, I mentioned it earlier, connecting with people through social media. Like I started basically with the radio show. Like Sam was like, hey, same thing. It's funny. I got into Gary Vee back. I was in wine sales for a long time. So back in like 2007, when he was doing Wine Library TV, someone was like, "Oh, you gotta check this guy out." And I'm like, "Oh, cool." And I loved him. His approach to selling wine and just like describing wine, I thought was fantastic. And then, watched his shows for like 6 months, and then that was it. Like nothing. 10 years go by. I'm just like working, no social media, no YouTube, blah, 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 blah. And someone sends me another video. I'm like, check this guy out. And I'm like, oh, I know him. And I'm like, wait a minute. He's not selling wine anymore.
Right.
It was pretty interesting. I was like, whoa, what's going on here? But the idea of like just doing a show, creating a personal brand for all, because I'm involved in so many things, like having that as an umbrella was eye-opening for me. And literally I meet Sam through another show, and he's like, do you want to start a show? And I was like, oh, I heard this was a good idea. So I hopped in, basically on social media in relationship to the show. And again, just pumping that out and nothing. It was like crickets. And I started posting like workout videos because I saw some guys, connected with them. And then all of a sudden they're like, oh, you have a show? And I'm like, yeah. And they're like, oh my God, your show's great. And I'm like, oh, that's how it works. You got to just put like these little trail of crumbs, to get to, and like make serious connections, like really like support people. And like Tea with Mike, he's a great example. The kid is like, he just really like, supports other people in the community, like, and do you know Damon Johnson too?
Yeah, that's the
DJ Realty
founder.
What's that? No, DJ Realty.
No. Okay, no, I do not.
You got to check him out. Another guy, Tea with Mike. He was on a show just maybe like 4 weeks ago. Another guy that's just really great about that, where like if if you befriend him, he's going to pump you out to everybody. And that's just it's fantastic.
Well, those are the best relationships, man. And you mentioned Damon Johnson. I immediately went to Damon John, the shark from Shark
Oh, yeah, no.
Yeah, no, that's who I immediately thought of. I was like, okay.
I'm not in those circles yet. I know I seem,
working to get there, right?
We're the modified version.
Oh, man, I think that's the, oh, man. I'm gonna take a drink of coffee real quick.
Yeah. We're gonna take another break. So take 2 drinks. We'll take a quick break. We'll come back and we'll. All right, everybody, hang tight. We'll be back in just a few. All right, folks, we're bringing it back to you hot. We're here with Isaac Mashman in somewhere Arizona. I forgot where.
Arkansas, my man.
Arkansas.
Even a more random place.
I'm on fire today, man. I just had like 4 people come through the door, like trying to do some business, and I had to shoo them all the way. Yeah, no, it's great. It's better than the opposite. It's better than nobody coming through the door.
This is true.
Like, it's funny balancing like the stressors. It's like, oh my God, all these people. And it's like, when your phone's not ringing, you're like, fuck, I'll take it.
Or what's worse is when you're on a call and you have another person trying to talk to you and another person walks in the door, and man, but hey, I would rather that than just crickets.
Silence. Yeah,
chirp,
exactly.
Chirp.
So we've discussed a little bit about personal brand, and we've just kind of were talking on the last segment about, that being like the umbrella for, whatever else you kind of got going on. What else you got going on? What is the ideology for you behind creating the personal brand? You mentioned a couple things like interest in clothing line, interest in music production. What are some of the aspirations that you have? And then, the idea for you to provide this kind of service for somebody else, because that's at the cornerstone of what your company does.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so going into my senior year, I saw other people doing a clothing line, and up until that point, I had those entrepreneurial tendencies to where, I was I would take pins apart and I'll put the pins back together and I'll turn them into like pin guns. And I would try to get I had a catalog of pins at one point. I don't know what I was thinking. I did a lawn business. I passed out flyers in an entire neighborhood at one point. I had a trailer that was attached to my bike. I don't even think I've talked about this. I think I've maybe talked about this once, but I had a trailer and I put a lawnmower on the back of the trailer that we got from Harbor Freight. And I was on a bike and I would just bike through the neighborhood with that lawnmower, And so I had those tendencies, and I wanted to do a clothing line based around that whole hustle mentality. I cringe looking back, but I made $50 online and I never touched one piece of clothing. And I had it was a low profit margin, but I made like $5 per t-shirt sale. And that was kind of the spark of my personal brand. But I recognize is building up a brand is difficult for a company, for a restaurant, for example, but building up a brand based around who you are, you don't have to overthink it. You don't have to think about everything. I mean, there are a lot of different avenues and aspects to it, but getting into network marketing, I saw the importance of being considered a mentor, being considered somebody who is a leader, who other people on your downline looked up to, and that's personal branding. And then so over the past couple of years, man, I just went into and tried a bunch of different things. I didn't even realize that's what I was doing, and I never went far into any specific area. It was more so I kind of dipped my finger in it. I got too lazy and I wasn't consistent. I didn't get too far, but what I did is I had enough experience to understand if that was going to be the thing for me or if it wasn't. I'm grateful to say that I never had to try one thing for a full year or for 3 years and after a year and after all that time, I then realized that it wasn't for me. Like it was quick. You know, at the beginning of this year, I started out the year doing personal branding work for musical artists. And that's why I always have an interest in hearing about people who have like a musical background, because, you know, I worked with namely rappers. And then I wanted to do a record label. I managed an artist out of Indiana who I never met in person. It took me 4 months of managing the guy to finally meet him in person. And then I recognized that I had more of a passion for building up my personal brand and building up brands than I did for building up businesses. And I was like, well, why not combine the best of both worlds and start Mashman Ventures? And that's pretty much the beginning story, the backstory of how I got started with it. And yeah, man, I mean, personal branding at the core, I think people don't quite understand what it is. They think that they think that they don't have a personal brand, that it's something you create. But a personal branding at the core is who you are. It's your name, it's your background. I was blessed with a very unique name. Like I don't think there's any other Isaac Mashman. I know some people don't have that luxury, but at the core, you are the only person who has your name, who was born at the same exact time on that date in your place with those parents. And that adds to your personality. That's your personality. And people want to be associated with you for who you are. And there, you know, it doesn't matter if you're an artist, it doesn't matter if you're a business owner, it doesn't matter if you're an actor, model, any of those things, or just simply somebody who might be working for a company. Your boss knows you, and for you know, you have a position in that company and they know you and they hired you for a specific reason. That's your personal brand. And so, yeah, there's so many different avenues, but I'm not trying to go into a bunch of different areas.
I have a question for you then about this, because I'm working on a consultation like side project. I've been a business consultant for years, you know, but always just like random, you know, somebody comes to me with something. I mean, here's what happens. People come to me all the time and ask for advice on things. And when certain company is around, they're like, you should charge for this. And I'm like, I'm a nice guy. I'm like, oh, like it's happened. For free, yeah. Yeah. But I've charged, like I've consulted for major restaurants and wine stores and, you know, done big, like build outs and things like that. So then I'm getting paid, but like literally like enough business people have been around when it happened that are like, man, you gotta, like, even if it's just a little bit, like monetize yourself a little bit. So I'm in a mastermind right now. It's my first one with this guy, Lance Knob. He's been on the show. He's out of New Jersey. He's great. He's a PhD in physical therapy, but same thing, after like years, he's got several clinics, so he's gone through the business aspect of it. And then after years of like helping people fix their bodies, he realized he could also help them fix their, you know, their lives or their businesses or whatever. So he's doing both. It's really fantastic. And it's the same has kind of come up for me. So we're at this crossroads right now in the mastermind for my particular project. As like the conundrum is, do we give it a company name? You know, like whatever consulting, or is it just me as a personal brand and it's just another component of what I do? So I started to put it out onto social media, like asking questions, even through like the restaurant's website and social media. I've said, you know, would you rather work for a celebrity chef or at one of their restaurants? And just trying to get feedback from people. What would be your instinct on that? I know what mine is, but I'm curious what your instinct would be. Would you create a company name? Or would you do like you did and create a company name that's tied to your name?
Well, I think it goes down to your individual goals with who you are and what you're trying to be known as. Obviously, you're at the core, it's who, you know, you're trying to be known for yourself, but there are different avenues that like people are going to automatically take to you and know you for certain things more than they know you for other things. But if you are doing this talk show, if you're doing a restaurant and all these other, you know, side hustles and passions and projects, you're not going to be known as a coach. You're going to be known as, you know, yourself. You know, creating a company based around that thing is great. But when you go to build a company, you have to give it characteristics. I personally tied my company name and I created it based around my last name because I'm taking the approach, you know, love him or hate him, Donald Trump is a fantastic marketer and brand. Yep. Like he built up a brand he put Trump vodka, Trump steaks, Trump everything, Trump airlines, you know, and I kind of looked at that and I was like, you know what, I could kind of do the same thing. Grant Cardone Ventures, Cardone Enterprises, because I recognize the last name has more weight than your first name. I was reconnecting just last night, working with people online, or reconnecting with some people who I knew from a couple years ago, back when I was attending church, back in Boy Scouts, back in all those different things. And I could remember the first name, but the last name was what made it difficult to reconnect with them, because I forgot some of their last names. And that kind of hit home. And I was like, man, you really have to make that impression. But it goes down to the serious, how serious are you about doing that? I think that having a personal brand and promoting it and promoting this passion project would be great. But at the same time, you don't want to over promote something and then under promote the other avenues and the other things that you're also passionate about. And so in that particular case, man, like creating a company and then using your personal brand to market it, and if you're doing it with him, is good. But so there's so many different avenues. Like I'd have to ask you the goals. Like people ask me these questions and they're like, you know, what do you think? And I'm like, well, I could give you the generic answer, or I could give you the answer that's like accurate. And that takes time to break down, you know, what are your goals with this? What are your personal goals? Do you feel more driven to talk about this project than you are this project? You know, and there are levels to, you know, determining what the best way of doing that would be.
Yeah, and that's like the course the mastermind is on. You know, we have to fill this whole, like, it's like a basic 1-page form, but you keep adding to it, and it's like mission, goals, yada yada yada. And we're just at this point right now, and it's kind of like 50-50, where people are like, just name it after yourself, and people are like, make it a company. One of the things, the big questions was, do you see yourself having employees in 3 to 5 years? If so, you should probably make it a company. And I'm like, shit, I don't know. Like, I really don't know. Or you just
really build it up to where you do it based around your last name. But when you're associating it with your last name and with like a separate company, let's say, you know, your last name's Fox, right?
Yeah.
So let's say, I mean, you could do, let's just go and use Fox Ventures or something like that, which wouldn't be a good name just because you have Fox News and the Fox Corporation. Like,
you got to be careful with that one.
Yeah. Well, you also, this is something people don't realize. It's like, I ask people what pops up when you Google yourself, and people automatically think that you're a narcissist for Googling yourself. No, it's reputation management. And if you were to Google Fox Ventures, I guarantee Fox News and that entire thing would pop up. And so naming your company based around your last name would be a bad move. Now, if you were to do Jeremiah Fox Ventures or something like that, and then have all of your other ventures underneath that one company umbrella, then that might be a good move.
Yeah, that was discussed, like creating, and then, but also being very clear and legally separating everything out. So like if one got sued, the larger entity wasn't, you know, dicing it up. So everybody was protected the same way you do in LLC, you know?
Right.
It gets tricky.
It's complex.
You know, it is. I love it though. I love it.
It's a challenge, but I love it. And I'm right there with you on that. But it goes down to the holding company and what defines a holding company versus a parent company. And then, you know, what percentages will you lose those tax benefits if your holding company is actually acting as another company? And it's just, man, there are a lot of different avenues to that. But I think that's, if it was easy, what would be the fun in it? You know, like
definitely.
It's same thing with getting into shape or doing martial arts. Like you want to be challenged so you can improve. And so you can look back and be satisfied and feel accomplished with how far you've come. And that's how I view this entire, you know, business area. This is how I view entrepreneurship, self-growth, all of it.
Man, you're so ready for jiu-jitsu. You got to do it. As soon as school's open back up, you got to get in there. Yeah.
I'll be talking to you after this then about, you know, what to look for and that, see if you can point me in the right direction.
Cool. All right. We're going to take one more break. When we come back, I want to talk about your podcast.
Let's do it.
All right. We'll be back in just a minute, everybody. All right, everybody. Ding, ding, ding. We're going to bring in the last round of this show today. Again, we're talking to Isaac Mashman. If you're just tuning in, he's in Arkansas near Little Rock.
Yes.
Got it. I always get it by the end. By the end, I'm always golden.
Hey, that's what matters. That's what matters.
Yeah. So Isaac, he's got a branding company called Mashman Ventures. His last name's Mashman, but he's also got a podcast called Chase the Vision. Tell us about your podcast.
Yeah, well, I actually launched the podcast underneath a different name back in June of 2019. It was called the Hustler's Choice Podcast. And that was before I really recognized how much I despise the whole hustle culture. And it was more so just because people would say things, but they didn't know what they meant. And it took me a while to really figure out what everything meant too. It was a level of maturity. You know, I never came out the gate thinking that I knew everything. But at the same time, I took to different avenues. But I started the podcast as that kind of stereotypical, I'm going to talk about things pertaining to entrepreneurship and business and all this other stuff. And then I did about 16 episodes over the course of, the year. And then earlier this year, right when I made the transition and launched my company, because I was acting as a sole proprietor, and I had a company called Mashman Media. And I never like legally filed anything. It was more sole proprietorship. I'm going to go ahead and use the doing business name as Mashman Media, Mashman Coaching, and do everything stereotypical to, social media. And then right around that time, that was when I transitioned out of that space. And I was like, okay, it's time to actually be that business professional and not that entrepreneur. And I decided to change the podcast over from The Hustler's Choice to Chase the Vision with Isaac Mashman. And I made that change really because I recognized that all too often on social media, we think that the only people that have a vision are entrepreneurs, because everybody gets so stuck up in their own ways, or stuck up with like, I have entrepreneur in my bio, so that makes me better than you, or I have this grand thing to be a millionaire or a freaking billionaire, and that's just, it's easy to say, because we as humans get attached to the emotional side of things, and we see the people with the Lamborghini, we see the private jets, we see the glitz and the glamour, but I recognize that people have a vision that are outside of business. For example, you could be an artist, although being a rapper, being an artist, being in music is technically business. It's not like, you don't label it as a business. You label it as you're a musical talent. You could be a model or an actress. You are a business as a person, as a personal brand, but you're not, you don't have your own business doing that thing. And, at the core of the show is really talking about self-development and personal development. I don't want to label it as a business show, because at the core of all success is personal growth, at the core of all achievement. Because if I haven't grown, I wouldn't be able to have this conversation with you, because I would be talking about the same things I was talking about 3 years ago as a high schooler. I've grown, so I'm able to elevate my conversation. I'm able to talk about new things, have discussions, and, learn new things. And I thought that by having a show based around that topic and based around just the core of talking about my experiences, talking about my knowledge, I'd be able to help a lot of people along the way. Because you don't have to be some millionaire to be able to deliver value. Even though I'm striving to hit those levels, I recognize that a lot of people come to me for advice, whether that be relating to business or relating to friendships. And if I could give you value and save you time, I'm all about saving time. I'm a naturally impatient person, and I'm of the attitude of aggressive patience. And that's not my term that I coined, rather a mentor of mine. But if I could aggressively pursue something and recognize that it won't happen overnight, but at the same time, I'm going to go at it with all of me, then I would be able to get those results in a much shorter span of time and be able to enjoy the fruits of my labor for a longer period of time as well. And so, yeah, man, 43 episodes in, I've kind of laid off of it over the past month, been working a lot on my company, getting different aspects of, when you're starting a business, you have levels of maturity, and I'm finally reaching a point to where I'm very clear on the services I'm offering. I'm clear on all those different things. And so I've been taking a lot of time on that, but, I've been, really planning and trying to mastermind how I can take the show and grow it in 2021.
Awesome. Very cool. And where does that archive at?
You could literally find the show everywhere. Okay. I use Anchor as a hosting provider. Mm-hmm. Free shout out to them. They've been tremendous to me. Cool. But you can literally find the show everywhere. Thank you for mentioning that, by the way.
Yeah, definitely. No, this is a highlight for you for sure. I always love to, take a person and give them the spotlight for a minute. And before we end in a few minutes, definitely want you to let people know where they can find out about you even further. I like that idea of aggressive patience. My wife and I were talking about it the other day. She's she's part of everything, but she's a high school math teacher. But a lot of especially the challenges they've had this year, having somebody like me around, she's always like, what the fuck do I do with this? She's used to being in the bureaucracy, and there's just protocols, but that shit got all thrown out the window. And we were talking about it the other day, and I was like, we're talking about patience. And I was like, well, you have to know when, there's a point where you just have to strike. There's no patience, there's no thought process. You just boom, there's the opportunity, your intuition takes over. Mm-hmm. But you also have to know when you can't do anything about it, you just sit back. Let somebody else take the wheel. And you kind of mentioned that, where it's you get some you time. It's whether you're just unplugging and you're thinking about something else. You can be thinking about your plants. I noticed that you were posting about plants. I was like, this is awesome. If you can keep a plant alive, if you can kind of focus on that for a little bit, that's a testament to your ability to keep something else going. But But yeah, like knowing when to just like unplug and be like, nothing can really be done right now, so I'm not going to obsess over it. We're just going to let it go and coast, versus like, now it's hot. Now we got to like do something, even if it's not the best idea, like something just has to be done, you know?
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of people go into business and go into any venture thinking that they're going to get the results automatically. It's like getting into shape. Everybody knows how to get a six pack. Everybody knows how to lose weight. Everybody just looks for the diet pill. And I'm sorry, but the diet pill is going to mess up with your heart, mess up with your body. You're not going to lose weight healthily and in a healthy way. And I think that that's applicable to business and you know, building up a business, building up a podcast, building up an audience, a brand, and not only knowing and having the self-awareness and the understanding of when you can't do something, or taking the time to figure out how you can do something, right? I'm more on solutions than I am problems. And for plants, man, you know, to mention about plants is I had a very difficult time. I still have a difficult time giving myself permission to feel okay with doing something that isn't related to business or growth, you know, because I was so programmed, I became obsessed with the thought of growth. And, you know, I have this image in my mind of who I can become and who I am becoming and, you know, what's out there. So if I'm not at that point, I have to learn to enjoy the process and understand that it will take time to get there. And so starting plants, man, was kind of just a random hobby. I'm looking over here because I have sweet peppers growing on the windowsill.
Nice.
In this apartment, man. So, but no, it's cool.
That's cool. Are you familiar with Simon Sinek and the Infinite Game?
I am not. I'm familiar with the name, but I never really followed him.
Check out the Infinite Game. You know, just like everybody else, you know, take them with a grain of salt. But the idea is around the infinite game. I think you'll get into that. It's something I tuned into maybe like 6 months ago, and it's just like, instead of like that idea of, I just posted about this on LinkedIn too. Had a business consultation meeting with a guy that was looking to open a restaurant, and the idea of him building it up to sell it came up, and I was like, that's great. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that, but don't think about that going in. I was like, if you want to build it to sell it, trick yourself and pretend like you're going to pass it on to your kids. Like that's how you'll extract the most out of it, you know, versus chasing numbers on a piece of paper to, you know, to show some potential buyer, you know, and the infinite game kind of deals with that, like not cashing in and out, just staying in the process, like no matter what you're doing. It's really great.
I'm definitely going to check that out, man. Thank you for the recommendation. You know, I'm big on personal development. I mean, if I wasn't, I wouldn't be doing the podcast. I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing. But, you know, I think that that's another thing that's important, because people say, I want to make $1 million. And they think that the seven, you know, the one with the 6 zeros is going to solve all their problems. But at the same time, you get to that mark and it's like, what else are you building for? You know, I have some pretty hefty goals by the time, you know, I'm 24, 25 years old. But I was thinking about this and having a conversation with somebody who I connected with through Facebook yesterday about this topic of, you know, so what, I make this amount of money, but it's what's more important, the amount of money or the person and the work that I have to do in order to get to that point? And then what is after that point going to look like? You know, if I make this amount of money, I can retire and do, you know, whatever I want. But at the same time, I don't want to become stagnant, because I've seen personally people who become stagnant and their life gets away from them. Or there's a reason I use this analogy, and it's kind of a morbid analogy to use, but it's truthful. And I think that sometimes you have to use the stuff that doesn't sound like sunshine and rainbows to get your point across. But people who retire, right? It's like 65 is the magical age of retiring. And people retire, and then why does the mortality rate spike? You know, because people stop growing, they stop being active. And it's like, even at that point, you need to do something that is going to keep you growing. It's going to keep you in that process, keep you aware, keep you in the present moment of growth.
Yeah. I'm telling you, man, you're straight jujitsu. You got to start. We got to wrap up though. So we'll continue that conversation later. But where can people find out about you if they want to connect with you? What's the best way to
Well, man, thank you, Jeremiah. You can literally find me everywhere at Isaac Mashman. You know, I'm in the process. I'm in the business of personal branding, so I got to be able to be found everywhere. You can find me on Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook.
Do you have a website too?
Yeah, isaacmashman.com. Been working on that a lot. Have some articles up there too that are pertaining to personal branding. So
awesome, beautiful. Well, thank you, man. Really awesome work. Great catching up. And again, we'll continue conversation. Maybe we'll hop on like an Instagram live or something and talk about jujitsu.
Dude, I'd love to.
Awesome. All right, everybody. Have a great weekend. We'll see you next week. Peace out.
Much love.